Intelligent, comfortable, and autonomous. That's how we imagine the transport of tomorrow to be. But is it really the automobile that will drive us into the future? The vision of a new means of transport seems promising. The Hyperloop, a train that could be able to travel faster than sound. Some people think it's a crazy idea, but researchers and entrepreneurs from all over the world are working on making the Hyperloop a reality. Should we stay faithful to old concepts of mobility or accept an uncertain future? Los Angeles, the city of dreams, is the birthplace of a vision that could revolutionize our travel speed. The Hyperloop, a train that floats through a vacuum tube. The idea came from billionaire Elon Musk. He got rich from internet businesses and primarily produces electric cars and rockets for personal space travel. He doesn't want to build the Hyperloop himself, so he's organizing a competition for students from all over the world.
So what this is really intended to do is to encourage innovation in transport technology, to get people excited about new forms of transport, things that may be completely different from what we see today, but to really just get people to innovate and think about doing things in a way that's not just a repeat of the past, but to explore the boundaries of physics. I think it's ultimately going to be something that inspires the world and results in real transportation technologies that help people's lives and make them better. Once again, congrats to everyone. I'm amazed at what the student teams have done. Really has blown my mind, and may the best team win.
There is also a team of people there from Munich. The students are absolutely determined to be highly involved in the mobility of the future. They're up against teams from all over the world in the competition. Which one of them will build the best Hyperloop prototype?
We've been working on it for around a year now, and we brought it here. So of course we're really excited now to compete against the other teams and to see how our design measures up alongside the others.
Over 400 student teams have supplied a concept. The 27 best teams were invited to build their prototypes and are competing against each other for the first time in Los Angeles. One team traveled from Tokyo.
We were thinking that it is time to reinvent our transportation system. Currently we have car, boat, planes for more than 100 or 200 years. So we want to have a next innovation to bring people to have high-speed transportation all around the world.
The members of the youngest team are still at school. The 16-year-olds from Texas developed their vehicle together with their teacher.
I am 100% sure that this is going to work and that in the future we will be using the Hyperloop for transportation.
Dutch students from the Technical University of Delft are the second team of Europeans to have made it to Los Angeles. All the others from Europe were eliminated at an earlier stage. It is still hard to imagine that the transport of the future could be born out of these creative workshops.
I believe that the Hyperloop concept will become a reality. I think it would be great if we could travel that quickly and bring parts of the world much closer together.
Forecasts predict that transport in general will grow. More and more people are covering longer and longer distances. They're doing business and traveling across the entire globe. The current infrastructure is not designed for a society that is continuously on the move. It's a worrying development, thinks Michael Schreckenberg. People's mentalities don't take into consideration the actual state of affairs or our ever-diminishing resources.
People expect to be able to be mobile at all times, which means being able to use transport at any time. They expect the infrastructure to be available and for us to have the energy for it. That creates a certain attitude in people, and problems arise when things are no longer available. And in the future, we will have to live with limited resources.
Owning one's own car is not as important to young people as it once was. But thanks to greater prosperity and population growth, the number of cars is continually rising around the world. The result? Roads are under strain, and there is more and more construction work and congestion.
Statistically speaking, a car is stationary for 23 hours a day. That means it is dead capital that I could invest better somewhere else. So car sharing and public transport are better alternatives. There are different concepts, but in the end it depends on whether people, the drivers, go along with these concepts.
One of these such concepts could be the Hyperloop. The idea is not new. The basic principle of the Hyperloop is quite old even. It is based on a transport system that wasn't intended for people, but for important documents, the pneumatic mail tube. In New York, enormous letter chutes connected entire districts with each other. They also sent letters within one building from floor to floor. They were sent in containers through a pipe and transported at up to 40 kilometers per hour by the air pressure. It's a system that remains in place today. The canister fits so precisely in the pipe that it slides without any air escaping. Air is sucked out of the pipe in front of the canister, creating a suction that drives it. An idea that the Hyperloop picks up on. It also floats through a tube, out of which almost all of the air has been pumped. The capsule hardly decelerates at all in this partial vacuum. Only a very small amount of air stays in the pipe. Just like an aeroplane, the passengers travel in a pressurized cabin that balances out the low air pressure. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to breathe. The low level of air resistance makes the Hyperloop very fast. At 1,200 kilometers per hour, it could connect Paris and Berlin in around an hour. Enough for theory. Dirk Alborn wants to prove that it can also function in practice.
We have the chance to develop a means of transport the way it should be done in 2017. Of course, we need to be able to use various pieces of technology. When I consider just how much time I spend in traffic and in our car, on the train, on planes, I think just how many better options there are.
Several years ago, Alborn established a company in Los Angeles. It is one of several startups working on implementing the Hyperloop. Yet at this stage, it remains little more than an idea. Investors are needed. Potential investors get an introduction to operating the Hyperloop using abstract models. Above all, it is a foundation course in magnetism. The power of magnets plays a significant role for two decisive elements of the Hyperloop. The capsule is able to float with the help of magnets, and it can be driven. They're attached to the underside of the Hyperloop capsule. When these magnets move across the bottom of the tube, they create a further magnetic field there. Both magnetic fields consist of a south and north pole. two south poles meet each other. Since equal poles repel each other, the capsule floats. A kind of aluminium fin allows for the movement. It runs along a track made of magnetic coils. These coils can be activated with electricity. They can also create a magnetic field in the aluminium fin. The magnets in the track repel the capsule forwards. So the capsule moves forwards. It's rather a complicated piece of technology that leaves many questions open. In Alborn's company, the motto is, "The majority is more intelligent than the individual." There are headquarters here, but the staff members are spread across every continent. They're connected by an internet platform.
We gathered a small team together and said, anyone who wants to be a part of this and is ready to give at least 10 hours per week in exchange for a share in the company in the form of company stock options, or better said, shares or share options, should get in touch. Then we had around 200 applications. Out of those, we selected just 100 engineers and worked with them on a feasibility report.
The students from Munich have found a temporary workshop in Los Angeles, where they can put together their capsule after transporting it to the USA. They still need to qualify for the run through the test pipe. Whether or not the capsule will be allowed into the tube depends on how well developed their system is. Things become clear during the construction. Crucial parts are missing. They were taken at customs. And without these parts, the chance to access the pipe is as good as zero. But the team have another week left. Working on the Hyperloop is a hobby for the students. It isn't recognized as study time. There's no payment for it either. Only the cost of the prototype is covered by sponsors such as Airbus. For the students, it is, above all, an investment in the future, in the great dream of co-creating the transport of tomorrow.
There have always been concepts to speed up travel. We dream of making a quick trip to Australia one evening for dinner and coming back again. We dream of being able to change places quickly, to be able to shrink the world down, so to speak. That's something that has been just a dream until now.
The inventor Eli Beach is already dreaming of this in 1867. He wants to build an underground commuter car in New York that glides through a tube due to air pressure. But the city only allowed a letter chute system for packages. Secretly, Eli Beach advises his team to continue going ahead with building the train for people, so that he can prove that the system works. But the city still denies it and puts its bets on the system that took off not only underground, but also above ground: the railway. The train has been the most important means of transport in the West for the past century. But it is complex. The track bed, rails, signalling and control systems, as well as stations, all need to be built. That is only worthwhile over the long term. Nowadays, the structure of cities is so often oriented around railway lines, they've developed around train stations. This infrastructure cannot simply be written off.
Mobility is not something that is just handed to us. People have had to work hard for it. And it's also linked to our enjoyment. It has been one of the most liberating things for humankind to be able to choose where to move to. It was so different in the past, when people were more or less trapped in their localities, until this liberation came. It also has something to do with bringing great pleasure from traveling independently.
Sich auf der Straße selbstständig zu bewegen.
Until the beginning of the 19th century, the horse was the fastest means of transport. But animals need regular breaks and food. If you don't feel like waiting around, you need to change horses around every 20 kilometers. So in the Roman era, post offices start to emerge along well-traveled paths, keeping stalls with rest horses at the ready. Nowadays, 20 kilometers is a normal distance between small towns, because they were originally refueling and service stations from earlier generations. A horse is not exactly a cheap means of transport. This animal needs around 6 tons of food each year. Growing their food requires land and labor. Oats are precious goods, and soon they will be hard to afford. As the Tambora volcano explodes on the Indonesian island of Sumbawa in 1815, tiny particles of sulfur are hurled into the atmosphere. They combine with water, and the rest like a veil over the entire globe. Rays of sun can hardly penetrate it. The effect? A year without summer and poor harvests all over Europe. The oat crops are hit especially hard. The price of oat rises to a staggering degree. Even the upper classes start to desire a means of transport that does not need to be fed. Experts disagree on whether or not it really was the volcanic eruption that inspired inventors. But the fact remains, Karl von Drais, an aristocrat from Mannheim, constructs a walking machine that changes the world. The Dreissign. This vehicle was said to be all the rage for several years. Soon, the bicycle develops out of this. The only disadvantage, people have to use their own muscle power. The first car removes that drawback. It is driven by an electric motor. Yet the increasingly powerful oil industry promotes the combustion engine, and the electric car is forgotten. With increasing levels of prosperity, more and more people can afford to be mobile. The car took over the railway to become the most important means of transport. The powerful automobile companies are not prepared to give up their upper hand. But congested roads, environmental damage, and expensive gas makes the car less and less attractive. Yet the producers start to rethink. In the future, mobility, digitalization, and marketing could all go hand in hand. The car could fulfill every desire, even the ones passengers don't have yet.
Good evening, Isabel.
Hello.
Are you well?
Great. Why?
Your vital signs are low. Maybe you'd like a coffee to get your circulation moving.
No, thank you.
The detour is only 1.37 kilometers. You'll make your appointment.
It's too late for a coffee.
Then perhaps a vitamin drink or a protein shake.
Whatever.
Very well. I'll order a berry smoothie for you. They're on offer today with our partner DrinkFit. You'll save 15%.
Fantastic. Can you slow down a little?
With pleasure. The problem in traffic is not usually the technology. The technology is easily available. The problem is people themselves. And the question is how people use technology. Who reads 500 pages of their car manual nowadays so that they can operate each inbuilt system?
Owners of modern-day autonomous cars really ought to keep an eye on the car the whole time during journeys. They need to be ready at all times to take hold of the steering wheel. But many people don't take that seriously and post videos of what they're doing online during the journey. So far, the autopilot function is only capable of one scenario, in which it can avoid collisions. That is too little for complex traffic scenarios. In May 2016, the autopilot function of a Tesla car caused an accident. The owner had handed over full control to the car. In the accident, the 40-year-old passenger died. Joshua Brown fell as the first traffic victim of a new era. His car raced into a truck without braking. It was visible for several seconds, enough time for a reaction. Normally, the autopilot function scans the lane right in front of it. If it picks up on an interruption in the road, it brakes. This works very well on motorways without any side roads. But the truck came from the side. The Tesla scans the lane, but the truck has such a large wheelbase that the lane registers as temporarily free. The sensors do register an obstacle, but because the lane appears to be free, it is interrupted as an overhead sign.
The sensor technology in self-driving cars today is mainly intended for motorway driving. It's not yet ready to give a good overview of complex intersections. We could even say that it may never be ready for that. For that, we need a far greater capacity for detection. We'd need to know far more about the crossing traffic that is not yet in sight. But it's unfortunately the case that people nowadays jump to the conclusion that the cars can do everything, which the Tesla accident showed us.
Meanwhile, in Los Angeles, the students from Munich have arrived at the site of the competition. Lucas and his fellow student Thomas are comparing the models of their competitors with their own design. Their final parts have finally been released from the customs offices, and they're ready for their first test run. If it's successful, the team could really make it into the tube. They've overcome the first obstacle.
Our secret weapon is the compressor. We're one of the few teams using a compressor like this. Its job is to suck the residual air out of the tube. There's a partial vacuum in the tube with an atmospheric pressure of 1/100th, and that would cause some air friction, which would slow down our pod. We don't want that, so we're sucking the air out, and then we can travel very quickly through the tube without the air resistance.
The next step is that they have to attach the magnets that were released from customs onto the prototype, or pod for short.
The magnet is used to make the pod float. It's screwed onto the underside here, and as soon as the pod moves at around 180 kilometers an hour across the track, it creates a buoyancy that's strong enough to lift the pod up.
The test pipe is too short to accelerate the pod with its own power. So it is push-started by a so-called pusher, a supporting vehicle. It brings the pod to such a speed that it is able to lift up and float. Especially in areas that otherwise have very little infrastructure, the Hyperloop could reduce travel time drastically. A journey from San Francisco to Los Angeles currently goes through the middle of the desert and takes around 6 hours by car. Flying is the only alternative at the moment. With the Hyperloop, you would be there in around 36 minutes. The energy that the Hyperloop needs would be delivered free. Solar cells on the roof of the tube supply it with electricity. Energy used in braking would also be saved.
The whole system is, of course, completely eco-friendly. It isn't eco-friendly just because we want it to be, but rather I think that in the field of alternative energy, the biggest advantages are ultimately found when we really use alternative energy to our own advantage. So, in our case, we have solar cells on the route, along its whole infrastructure. In California alone, we can cover all of our energy needs with solar power alone. In addition to that, we have wind and kinetic energy. So there is the advantage that the running costs of the system are so low that it is possible for us to make a profit.
Der Hyperloop zeigt eine Technik,
The Hyperloop demonstrates a piece of technology that could be brought to life today. We could make it happen. But we have seen many technological developments, including in Germany, that were also possible. The Transrapid could also have been possible. Its speeds are lower, but the technology is there. And this example really shows us that something like that can work. The new transport system, the magnetic Transrapid.
In 1985, in Emsland, Lower Saxony, a test run takes place. The Transrapid doesn't glide through an air-free tube, but it does move with magnets, just like the Hyperloop. The suspension railway reaches a speed of 412 kilometers per hour, faster than our modern high-speed trains. The Transrapid is politically controversial from the very beginning. Opponents to it don't see the point in a train that requires its own infrastructure, devouring billions to build. For others, it's a flagship project. But hardly any German politicians have thus far had the confidence to go ahead with its costly implementation. On September the 22nd, 2006, in the middle of its test route, the Transrapid races into a workshop van that had accidentally been parked there. 23 people die, 10 others are injured. Today, the former test route is a ruin. Since the accident, nobody in Germany wants to invest in the Transrapid anymore, even though it has been working successfully in Shanghai since 2002.
Really, the Transrapid was ahead of its time, or it was one of the first systems, and it was seen as a kind of disgrace. But really, when you make a mistake, it's all about learning from it and carrying on. And for some reason, it's not like that in Germany. There's always a bit of feeling ashamed for our mistakes, feeling ashamed for what we failed at. And in my opinion, that's exactly the wrong approach. It's just a part of it. And if I don't make any mistakes, I'm not able to build a better product.
Safety management is still in its infancy for the Hyperloop. At the competition in Los Angeles, the students are of course working on models with the highest possible safety measures, but their prototypes are still in no way ready to transport people. The pods up to now only have the necessary technology to make the journey through the tube. The students haven't yet dared to tackle the pressurized cabin, but that is exactly where the danger lies. If the pressurized cabin breaks, the passengers in the vacuum are in danger.
It's kind of like the airplane claustrophobia and depressurization problem amplified, because you have no windows, and if it depressurizes, you're definitely going to die. So we need ways to mitigate those problems. I think having a comfortable cabin that is spacious and stuff can help deal with claustrophobia, and there definitely need to be safety systems to deal with depressurization and emergency evacuation. So those are problems that need to be solved.
Another challenge is the speed. up to 1,200 kilometers per hour. Can people even handle that? Today, we expect fighter jet pilots to travel at 3,000 kilometers per hour. They train to be able to endure the strain, and they wear suits to protect them. The danger is, however, not in the speed itself, but rather in the acceleration and deceleration phases. The takeoff and landing are particularly taxing for the body. There isn't the same up and down with the Hyperloop. It gains speed at an even pace and maintains its speed. For passengers, it probably feels similar to being in an aeroplane, but it will certainly take some getting used to, especially due to the vacuum.
Yes, there is, of course, always a certain danger present. But it has already worked with aeroplanes. They aren't in a vacuum, but the air pressure is notably lower. I think we just have to try it out and then continue to develop it until it's safe. So you could, for example, first try it out to transport goods so that nobody can get hurt. And when we then see, okay, it's safe, then we can start to transport people.
The international trade has so far worked mainly with container ships. Compared to the Hyperloop, they are unbelievably slow. Large container ships reach just 23 knots, so around 42 kilometers per hour. Today, means of transporting goods are already severely overburdened, and in the coming years, this is set to rise by 38%.
The problem with goods transport is that it is only worthwhile to use a system like the Hyperloop over a distance of, let's say, 300 kilometers. And the kind of goods transported is strongly restricted. It will not take the pressure off transporting goods. It will make products easier to deliver over large distances due to the high speed. But that doesn't mean the problems of transporting goods will be solved.
A ship can transport up to 20,000 containers at once, though. A Hyperloop, on the other hand, can only send one individual capsule through the pipe at once. Instead, transport experts are focusing on using streets more efficiently. With truck platooning, several trucks form a column on the motorway. They're connected via Wi-Fi and react simultaneously. The first in the chain leads the other vehicles, which save on gas in the slipstream. Theoretically, cars could do the same. The short distance between vehicles that react simultaneously would help prevent traffic jams. The car driver sends out a request to the convoy at hand. If the leader accepts it, its system takes control of steering the car. The car journey is similar to a train ride, with one significant difference. In platooning, everyone involved is notified that the network is functioning. The positive effects of platooning only really show up when as many cars as possible are linked and can communicate with each other. For that, car producers would need to create a unified standard, which hasn't happened yet. At the German Aerospace Center in Braunschweig, scientists are researching the technical foundations. They're developing a car that could become a data center, a kind of smartphone on wheels. GSM, UMTS, and GPS let the car send and receive signals. The researchers are developing a car that is able to communicate with its surroundings independently. It could be the breakthrough for a car that is autonomous and, at the same time, safe. The cars are not only intended to communicate with other vehicles, but also with their surroundings as a whole. But to make that happen, all parts of the street traffic need to speak the same language. Researchers have already taken the first steps. with intelligent traffic lights in central Braunschweig. These traffic lights signal to the car how long the current phase will last. The car knows at all times when the lights will turn red. Early field studies have already been successful. In the future, the car could be able to identify where other vehicles are stopping at all times. In an increasingly linked environment, pedestrians would also be recognizable to the car. The car gathers data continuously. It knows who is stopping, when, and where. Researchers believe that this linking effect will make street traffic safer.
One of the most promising projects for the future is networking. So that means that the cars can communicate with each other as we try to reduce the involvement of people more and more. The vehicles can harmonize together effectively thanks to certain algorithms, just like how, for example, a zip works. This is something we will see in future. And of course, the vehicles will also take over more functions independently. Really, the only thing that creates problems in transport is people.
In Los Angeles, morning has broken on the day of the competition. For the Munich Technical University students, things are getting serious. Their capsule is ready for the run through the test pipe. 1.5 kilometers of pipe are enough to get through. In theory, the pod could reach 350 kilometers per hour. But how is it looking for their competitors? Out of the teams that travel to be here, most failed to meet the tough requirements of the pipe. They were technically not sophisticated enough or just weren't ready in time. Alongside the team from Munich, only 2 other teams have qualified to make it into the final.
The problem is just that the SpaceX pushing vehicle somehow had a software failure or something. It's not working the way it's supposed to, anyway.
If the pushing vehicle doesn't push the pod quickly enough, it doesn't reach the speed that it needs to be able to float. The magnets only lift the pod at 180 kilometers per hour.
We decided not to use the magnets after all, because we're not getting fast enough with the pushing vehicle to lift off. And the magnets create a strong resistance that would slow us down. So we're leaving them out for now and trying to be the fastest team. Very fast, even if it's on wheels.
The first to be allowed into the tube are the Dutch students. Their design is particularly sophisticated, but they also have to deal with the defect-pushing vehicle. The push is clearly not strong enough. The Dutch model only makes it to the middle of the pipe. The next team is from the renowned MIT in Boston. They're the favorites to win the competition. Hardly anyone is in doubt that they can win. But even this pod fails in the middle of the tube. Now the team from Munich are up. The fact that they couldn't manage to lift off is annoying, but they want to at least get as far as they can in the vacuum tube. Just how far the push of the supportive vehicle will get them depends on how much friction the pod causes in the tube. The students can't do any more now. The prototype gets off to a good start. He's the only one to make it to the end of the tube.
Yes!
It's not quite the speed of sound, but it's enough to pass in the speed category.
It was our run of glory. Winning one of the main prizes is really just... I'm speechless. It's really great.
The prize for the fastest pod goes to Germany. Does the Hyperloop have a chance in Europe? Toulouse is an important centre for technology. The town has a lively startup scene. It's part of the so-called French Tech Initiative, which gives special support to innovative companies. A research centre is planned to open here to drive the development of the Hyperloop in Europe.
Well, I think that Europe is particularly interesting because we have shorter distances here. The system in general is perfect for distances within around 40 minutes to an hour. I think that's especially interesting at a time in which Europe seems to be falling apart a bit. It's a way we can think of to bring people together more.
Alborn has made a contractual agreement with the city of Toulouse to build his research centre here, although his company is not yet able to show a functioning prototype. It's still unclear whether or not networks are being planned in France. A city like Paris could only benefit from a Hyperloop if the Hyperloop station could be easily reached. The problem? Most cities already have a station in the centre, and the routes to the city outskirts are highly overburdened and often congested.
If we just build something that, let's say, takes you from Los Angeles to San Francisco within 36 minutes, or from Paris to Berlin in a little over an hour, but it still takes an hour and a half to get to the station, then you really haven't changed anything.
The Hyperloop can only be successful if other transport systems become more efficient, and if the various means of transport are synchronized together. The German student's capsule has now become an exhibition piece. It serves as inspiration for the next generation of students who will be taking over the concept and will show up in Los Angeles with a new design.
The difference between the first pod and the second pod is in principle everything that brings weight. That is, everything that isn't as efficient for the acceleration has been removed. And on the second attempt, everything is much lighter. At the second competition, it is really only about showing that you can get as fast as possible inside the tube.
On this second attempt, the students are keen to ensure that they reach the necessary speed to lift off. So they're planning with a way to avoid using the pushing vehicle, the part that failed at the first competition. The solution could be another driving force, a small electric motor that is particularly light and makes the Hyperloop so fast that it can float. The whole vehicle shouldn't weigh more than 80 kilos. So the students are systematically lightening the load of the capsule.
The brakes on the first pod were relatively dense and heavy, and in contrast, we're trying to make the second pod as light as possible, so that we can be as fast as possible, and so the brakes will also be much lighter. At the moment, we're doing various tests of the different braking systems that we have, which all have different weights, and so we need to see which is the best, which is the safest.
The team chooses a lightweight braking system with a total weight of just 4 kilos. Just one of countless decisions. And the students are only working on one prototype. It's hard to say whether they'll be ready to build an actual vehicle. the rail networks already in place have in many places reached their capacity limits. While the TGV in France has its own route, the ICEs in Germany share their tracks with goods trains and regional trains. If a regional train is delayed, it can have an effect across the whole country. Construction work on the rails and bottlenecks in scheduling cause increasing limitations. Expanding the rail network is already gobbling up billions, and yet it is still cheaper than introducing an entirely new means of transport.
The problem that we have today is that we can't use the current infrastructure well enough. We could do a much better job, especially with public transport. And when you think of establishing a whole new piece of technology that costs a lot of money, that would come into effect at some point in the future, with the kind of speeds that we can't even imagine today, you ask yourself, why didn't we just do our homework and upgrade what we already have to an acceptable level?
Erstmal auf einen Stand gebracht, der akzeptabel ist.
Sometimes existing infrastructure is also deliberately destroyed. Nowhere in America has worse congestion than Los Angeles. In this metropolis of 18 million people, the majority of its residents move through the city every day in cars. That hasn't always been the case. Up until the 1950s, the trams in Los Angeles enjoy great popularity. The tickets are cheap and the connections are good. People have no reason to buy expensive cars. Yet in 1961, the Pacific Electric Long Beach Line takes its final ride. It has characterized the urban image here since 1901. They're lovingly called red cars, but still they're slowly being taken out of service. A company has bought the trams and the track network. But the company doesn't want to run this public transport. It wants to dissolve it. A consortium of car producers, oil barons, and tire companies is behind the move. Without the trams, people have little choice other than to buy a car. Since then, Los Angeles has remained a city of cars.
You really need to look at each city in detail to see what the problems are there. It also depends on the people who live there, who can differ greatly, also in Germany. But there are, of course, certain basic parameters, and they are the public transport and personal transport options that will carry us into the next 50 years. It's not the case that we will at some point let go of using cars completely and rely entirely on public transport. There is no one-size-fits-all concept for cities in the future.
The Hyperloop is not a general concept for future travel either. It will only be suitable for certain routes and won't replace other means of transport. It is more of an addition for a generation that is constantly online and wants to have it all. Some companies see a business model in that. There is money to be made in the time the customer spends in the Hyperloop.
The travel ticket is actually a concept from the 18th century. Somebody decided it was the best way to earn money. And I think that we have better options nowadays. There are no windows in the Hyperloop. That means we need to develop something to psychologically still give the impression that there are windows. But if I have a virtual window, I don't necessarily have to show what's outside. I can show something else. I can offer you an experience. You can travel through Jurassic World or Game of Thrones. For you, it's an experience. And for the travel company, it's an opportunity to make money. I believe that we can create a completely new kind of content, experience content. You can also tell stories with it.
Customers aren't as important for the transport itself, but rather for the entertainment during the ride. And they pay with their own data. Alborn and his team are even going a step further. They want to know exactly who wants to go where and when, and what interests they have, in order to deliver a tailor-made experience. To do that, they need to screen the passengers.
We have a concept called the naked passenger, which ultimately presents a seamless passenger experience. When I'm naked, I have no wallet. I have no mobile telephone. I'm basically alone. What characterizes me are my biometrics, so I can prove my identity with my fingerprints, for example. I have my customer account. I just don't need anything else.
Is this the brave new world? With just a click or a scan, customers get everything they supposedly need. And in return, they give up their personal data. The Hyperloop would be a kind of implementation of the internet in the real world. But this is not only being lined up for Hyperloop users. It is more likely the case that digitalization will penetrate every area of mobility. We can't get away from it. The mobility of tomorrow is inseparably linked with digitalization.